This is episode 156 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Alex Cartwright. Alex is the chair of the management department and an associate professor of economics at Ferris State University, and also the principal at Hotel Shift, where they specialize in hotel to apartment conversions. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for that warm introduction, John. And it's a real pleasure to be on a podcast of that with this title. It was very creative. Everyone, some kind of very generic real estate title, but not giving your background even more appropriate title. I'm very excited.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I did notice if you just scroll through the titles of the many real estate, it's just pretty much real estate investing 101. All over, but this is here for the mindful approach to real estate investing. I love your background and with what you know about economics, it can really be a wealth to our viewers. But I told you before, I'm very interested in this hotel to multifamily conversion. I'm also interested in any type of repurposing of assets because I'm sure, as you know, commercial assets are going to need to be repurposed a decent amount over the next several years. And this is just one of the ways. But going back, when was the first time that you were interested in real estate that you can remember?
Was interested in real estate all the way back in graduate school. I went to graduate school in Washington, D.C., which is a pretty expensive place to live. Fortunate to have a scholarship to go to graduate school, but it didn't afford me a very nice place to live. It really afforded me a very mediocre place with a lot of roommates.
Yeah.
And that's where I really started putting pen to paper on the real estate market. And I was amazed at how you could take the risk to buy an asset like a townhouse, rent it out by the bedroom on a short-term basis, and be left with more cash flow at the end of the month. And I had no idea that this was called house hacking, but it began a fascination for me on the economics of contract law and how entrepreneurs in some sense are out there creating new types of property rights, new types of contract, buying something for a long term or taking certain kinds of risks, repackaging those risks and selling them to somebody else in either a smaller portion or over a shorter term. And that inspired kind of my dissertation and some academic research on the economics of contract law. So I was always thinking about real estate, but of course when you're a young graduate student, it's hard convincing a bank to lend to you. So I had to start off with Uber. This was right when Uber was becoming a big deal. And so I bought some cars and rented them out to drivers. And so I didn't rent by the day or by the hour. I charged a percentage on their earnings so that incentives were well aligned. And the cars could, in theory, be rented 24 hours a day. And so it was kind of the same idea of buying a house and then renting out the pieces. I was buying the car and then renting it out kind of piecemeal to different drivers. But as soon as I graduated and got a real job, then it was of course time to buy a duplex and another duplex and was able to grow the portfolio from there. I go to a conference and I happen to meet a broker who told me there's a hotel for sale in my area. And he says, why don't we go look at it? I think it makes sense as a conversion. And I had conceptually heard of people converting properties like old warehouses and office buildings and things built 100 years ago that have been converted or their use has been adapted. But I never thought about a hotel conversion for myself as an investment, didn't know anything about it. And we went and looked at the property, and all I could think about was what a pain in the ass this will be to convert. We gotta get permission from the city to rezone. Take over a hotel and shut it down, like take the franchise off and get all the guests out. And then you've got to put kitchens in every room and make sure all that's to code. And then you've got to lease it up from zero. You might have to do a year's worth of construction. And of course, you've got to account for the cost of capital during that construction time. But I sat down and I did exactly what we were talking about with the house hacking. You just start putting prices on all of those problems, just trying to, at a very high level, I started calculating out, is this worth it? And long story short is everything I just named out for you, the franchise, the zoning, the construction, all those are absolutely obstacles that cost lots of money, but they are worth solving. They're
Yeah.
absolutely worth solving. And there's kind of two reasons why they're worth solving. One, hotels can be purchased really cheaply, and we can talk about why this is. There are lots of distressed or near distressed hotels out there. Their value is not near what an apartment building is. We can talk about exactly why that is. But for right now, just take me at my word that hotels can be purchased pretty cheaply, especially older hotels.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's growing demand for workforce housing, not necessarily like Section 8 subsidized housing, but just basic entry level C-class housing. There's growing demand for that.
Yeah. And I mean, this is really a blue ocean strategy to go from something that everybody else is doing to something much tighter. But what I think is really interesting about hotel to apartment conversion that's different from kind of commercial office building is that you have the plumbing in each unit. And that's the hardest conversion when you're doing office conversion to residential, is that the plumbing doesn't work because there's bathrooms on the floors. With hotels, you probably don't have the kitchen, and yet unless you're like a La Quinta or something that had the kind of mini kitchens, but at least you have the bathroom set up to be correct. And that's a huge savings over buying like a Toys R Us or, some other big office WeWork place that didn't work out. Am I correct on that, that's where a really good savings is?
You're absolutely right.
I think for investors, when they're newer and they're thinking about investing, and maybe you thought about this when you were younger as well, you're really balancing like stocks seem great. I still like stocks, but I have no control and they're also not tangible. They're just on a screen. Real estate, at least you can go see it. You can live there. Buying your own home is a huge investment that can really pay off. But I think people kind of discount that as an investment, because even what you said before, there were people 20, 30 years ago who were using this house hacking strategy. It just didn't have a name.
Right.
They just thought like, hey, this is just smart business. But there's so many different ways that you can do stuff with real estate to increase your alpha, as you were saying, that I think it really is a reliable asset. But one that I think the more you know, the better.
Mhm. Mhm. And for people getting started in real estate, I just cannot more enthusiastically recommend house hacking. Like, let's just take 30
Yeah.
seconds. Let me endorse that. Like, there's just, you get to be a landlord on training wheels with, by managing kind of one unit. You get to put essentially zero money down. There's like very little difference between 0 and 3%, right? That means if this property goes up in value by 3% in
Right.
1 year, which it likely will, then you will have gotten your entire down payment back in equity in the first year. And beyond that, most people's biggest expense is their housing expense. If you can take that and cut it down, make it even a zero, to where you can take that money and invest it in whatever else you're going to invest it in, perhaps stocks. So my point is, if you like the house hack, the real estate can be an avenue to get you more cash flow and autonomy to buy some more of those stocks. And of course, you're paying down the debt on the real estate. It's hopefully appreciating. After a year, you can move out of it. Most duplexes just aren't big enough for families. You're in a school district where you're going to want to live once you're
Yeah.
married or later life stage. So I beg my students to consider doing that right upon graduation. Um, and and I've had very limited success. I think half a dozen students of mine have gone out, and these are my economic students, not like
Yeah.
real estate students, have gone out and purchased a duplex. I'm very proud of those that had. Some of them have kind of got sucked into buying a single family instead, which,
Yeah.
the nothing. But and now to your point, at least we have a name for it. It's called house hunting. Kind of a lot. They go home and they tell their parents what their professor recommended to them, and the parents are well intentioned, but oftentimes very risk averse. This sounds like such a
Yeah.
strange investment, right?
Yeah.
You're just buying yourself more headaches. The moral of the story is get comfortable running the numbers. And if you are unsure where to start with the numbers, then you find somebody that can advise you in the real estate market. But we tend to make decisions based on principle, like, oh, I've heard renting is bad, or I've heard both is good, right? Buying is good, right? When really just gain the confidence and invest in learning what is not that hard. to run these numbers and make the decision that's best for you.
Yeah, I like something that you said before. You were talking about getting the income from a house hack or from a rental property and then putting it also into stocks, because I think that people forget you don't have to just have one asset class in your bag. You don't have to just be a real estate investor or only invest in stocks, or you don't have to leave your W-2. You can use all of these things to make a bigger snowball so you have more to invest in whatever asset that you want to over time. And that's really like smart economism, I think, to really figure out, like, you just want to be earning the most amount of money, and you can use a lot of different assets to do that.